Hey everyone, Elena here. The day I bought my dream house, my parents tried to move in permanently, so I changed the locks on them. The Heart's Eyes brings you stories that prove patience can be more powerful than anger. If you're here for real-life twists that leave people speechless, make sure you're subscribed. Let's begin the story, and don't forget to press the bell icon. The day I finally signed the papers for my dream house, I felt a mix of excitement and relief. Years of saving, working double shifts, and sacrificing nights out had finally led to this moment, a place that was truly mine. I imagined decorating it exactly how I wanted, hosting friends for dinner, and finally feeling independent. But the celebration didn't last long. My parents, who had always relied on me for everything, showed up the next day, unannounced, acting like they had a permanent right to live there. At first, I thought they were joking. Maybe they just wanted to stay a few days. But the way they unpacked, rearranged, and settled in made it clear they weren't leaving anytime soon. That's when I realized this dream of independence was under threat, and I had to take control immediately. I changed the locks that evening. And with that, everything changed. The day I got the keys to my dream house, I felt like I was walking into a new chapter of my life. The hardwood floors gleamed under the sunlight streaming through the windows, and I could almost hear the echo of future laughter, dinner parties, and quiet evenings with a book in hand. Every corner of the house reflected the years of planning, budgeting, and sacrifices I had made. This wasn't just a house, it was freedom, independence, and proof that I could achieve something on my own. For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine life exactly as I wanted it. No unsolicited advice, no last-minute visitors, no feeling obligated to cover everyone else's expenses. But I also knew my parents would inevitably want to help or check on things. I had planned for that, or so I thought. The first night in the house, I arranged the furniture, hung the pictures I had carefully chosen, and even baked a small celebratory cake for myself. That's when I heard a knock at the door. My parents, cheerful and smiling, held suitcases and blankets as if they were moving in temporarily. I forced a smile, thinking they were joking, but the look in their eyes suggested otherwise. They were excited, but not in the way a guest is excited. They were excited to make this house their home. The next morning, I realized their idea of temporarily staying was not temporary at all. My parents had rearranged the kitchen, moved furniture around, and even taken over the guest room as if it were theirs. I tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe they just didn't realize the impact of their actions. But when I offered to make breakfast, my mother said, "Oh, we've got this. You've worked so hard, let us handle it." At first, it seemed helpful, almost sweet. But the truth sank in slowly. They weren't visiting. They were settling in, permanently. I tried hinting, subtly reminding them that this was my house, my space, my independence. My father chuckled nervously. "We just thought it'd be nice to stay a while. Don't worry, we'll pitch in." Pitch in? I had saved, worked, and sacrificed every hour to create this sanctuary, and now they acted like it was communal property. By the second day, it became clear they had no intention of leaving anytime soon. Every suggestion I made about boundaries or rules was met with excuses or laughter. Their bags were still unpacked, and the house that was meant to symbolize my freedom was quickly turning into a reminder of obligations I hadn't signed up for. I realized something had to be done, and soon. If I wanted to truly enjoy the life I had built, I had to make them understand that this house was mine, and mine alone. It didn't take long for the tension to grow. My parents acted like they had a permanent claim to the house, and I could feel my patience unraveling. Every corner I had carefully decorated, every little touch I had added to make this place feel like mine, was being rearranged or repurposed without my consent. I came home from work one evening to find my mother sitting in my favorite chair, reading a magazine, as if she had always owned it. I cleared my throat. Mom, can we talk?" She looked up, smiled, and said, "Relax, sweetie, we're just getting comfortable." Just getting comfortable? This was my home, my sanctuary. I imagined this house as a place of freedom and not a revolving door for parents who couldn't respect boundaries. Then came my father, who had started reorganizing my kitchen cabinets, labeling items, and even making notes about what should be stocked. He said, "We thought we could help manage things." His smile didn't reach his eyes. I realized then that it wasn't about helping, it was about control. They weren't just visitors, they were asserting dominance in my space. Every attempt I made to set boundaries was met with resistance. "We've raised you, don't be ungrateful," my mother said, waving my concerns away. "We're just trying to be helpful," my father added. It wasn't helpful, it was invasive. My house, my rules, my life. They were slowly erasing all of it. By the end of the week, I noticed something more troubling. My parents had begun inviting friends over, rearranging furniture, and acting like the house was a shared family property. I tried to reason with them calmly, explaining that this was my space, my investment, my dream. But every explanation was met with laughter, dismissive smiles, or guilt trips. The more I resisted, the more entitled they seemed to feel. It was then I realized, if I didn't act soon, I would lose not just my house, but the sense of independence I had fought so hard to achieve. I needed a solution, one that would protect my home and reclaim the boundaries they were erasing. The following days were even more challenging. My parents seemed to sense that I was growing frustrated, and instead of stepping back, they doubled down. My father started rearranging furniture with a sense of authority, claiming it improved the flow of the house. My mother took over my home office, leaving personal papers and books scattered, insisting that she was just helping me organize. Every inch of the space I had fought to claim as mine was slowly being claimed by them. I tried reasoning again. This is my home. I worked for this. It's not a hotel or shared property. My words seemed to bounce off a wall of entitlement. They smiled, nodded politely, and continued doing exactly what they wanted. I noticed subtle manipulations too, reminding me of everything they had done for me growing up, dropping hints about sacrifices they had made, and even trying to guilt me for being ungrateful in my own home. One evening, I came home to find them making dinner in my kitchen using ingredients I had carefully stocked for my own meals. My father looked at me, expecting approval. "He thought you'd like it," he said. I clenched my jaw, realizing that nothing I said would convince them of boundaries. They had no intention of leaving. Their idea of helping was now a thinly veiled attempt to settle permanently. The tension escalated further. My sister, who had initially seemed neutral, began hinting that I should just let them stay a little longer. Her words stung because she had always been more aware of boundaries, but now even she seemed caught in their influence. My patience was wearing thin. By the end of the week, I realized subtle conversations and reasoning wouldn't work. They had tested my limits for too long, and the longer I delayed action, the stronger their sense of entitlement became. My dream house was no longer a sanctuary. It was a battlefield, and it was time to take decisive steps to protect it and reclaim my independence. By the second week, the situation had reached a breaking point. My parents were acting as if the house had always been theirs. My father had started leaving personal items everywhere, claiming storage space, while my mother insisted on hosting guests in my living room. Even my sister, who had initially seemed indifferent, began hinting that I should just let them stay a little longer. Every argument I made was met with excuses, guilt trips, or outright dismissal. I realized that subtle hints and polite requests wouldn't work. They weren't merely overstaying, they were actively attempting to take over my home, my space, and my independence. Every morning I woke up to find new furniture arrangements, new rules they had implemented, and my sense of control slipping further. That night, I sat in the empty living room staring at the walls I had painted, the shelves I had installed, and the kitchen I had meticulously organized. I felt a mix of frustration, anger, and disbelief. This was my sanctuary, the result of years of sacrifice, and it was under siege by the people I loved most. It became clear that I had to act decisively. This wasn't just about furniture, rules, or who cooked dinner. It was about boundaries, respect, and protecting the life I had built. I realized if I didn't take control now, my parents would permanently occupy not just my house, but the life I had fought to create. That evening, I decided Tomorrow, I would change the locks. I would reclaim my home, my independence, and make it unmistakably clear that this house and my life was mine to protect. The next morning, I woke up determined. My parents had crossed the line, and their sense of entitlement could no longer be tolerated. I brewed coffee, sat down with my laptop, and opened the house management app. It was time to assert control. I changed the locks. Every single entry point, every door, every security code was updated. I didn't leave a note or warning. I wanted the moment to hit them fully, to make the reality unavoidable. By late afternoon, my mother knocked at the front door carrying a basket of my favorite snacks, smiling as if nothing had happened. "Surprise! We thought we'd settle in a bit." She stopped when she saw the look on my face. The keys no longer worked. My father fumbled it with the door, disbelief and panic spreading across his face. "Vanessa, what is this?" he asked. The smile that had been plastered across their faces for days melted into confusion and shock. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shout. I simply said, "This house is mine. You are welcome to visit, but you are no longer living here permanently. It's my space, and it always has been." My calmness seemed to hit harder than anger ever could. They had tested me for too long, and now the rules were crystal clear. For the first time, I saw them confronted with their actions. Their faces showed the weight of entitlement crashing down, the realization that this wasn't just a temporary inconvenience, but a direct consequence of ignoring boundaries. My sister hovered nearby, unsure whether to intervene or side with them. The shift was palpable. The power dynamic had changed, and they had no choice but to acknowledge it. The house, once a battlefield of subtle manipulations and unspoken expectations, became a stage for accountability. I had drawn the line, and for the first time, they were forced to respect it. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. The following days were tense. My parents lingered in the driveway, peering through the windows, calling out in frustration. My mother texted constantly, trying to guilt me into letting them back inside, while my father left voice messages that combined desperation with feigned calm. Every attempt at manipulation failed, because this time, I held the authority. I had set the boundaries, and they were non-negotiable. I watched as they realized the consequences of their behavior. My father, who had always acted confident and in control, now had to figure out where he could stay. My mother, who had been dismissive of rules and schedules, had to make alternative arrangements for meals and lodging. Their reliance on me for comfort and convenience evaporated overnight. The house that had once been a stress for me now became a symbol of independence, freedom, and clear boundaries. Even my sister, who had initially seemed indifferent, began to understand the gravity of the situation. She realized that comfort and familiarity don't grant entitlement. Observing her parents struggle with the reality they had ignored, she slowly started respecting the rules I had set. It was a subtle but important shift, signaling that my actions were not just about enforcing control, they were teaching responsibility. One evening, as I prepared dinner for myself in the kitchen they no longer occupied, I heard my mother sigh through the screen door. "We didn't expect this," she admitted, quietly, almost to herself. It wasn't an apology yet, but it was recognition, and acknowledgement that their actions had consequences. My father remained silent, sitting in the car, staring at the house, the realities settling in. They were facing a lesson they had never been willing to learn before. In those quiet moments, I realized the turning point had arrived. The house was mine again, yes, but more importantly, respect had been restored. They could no longer act as though entitlement was their birthright. They had to navigate life on their own terms, and I had reclaimed my life, my space, and my boundaries. By the end of the week, the full impact of my actions settled in. My parents were forced to face reality. They couldn't just rely on me anymore. They scrambled to find temporary housing, adjusting to a life where comfort wasn't guaranteed and convenience wasn't handed to them. The pride and entitlement they had carried for years crumbled under the weight of their choices. The house, once a symbol of conflict, now represented clarity. Every room I had fought to protect became a reminder of boundaries successfully enforced. Their attempts to manipulate, guilt, or cajole me were futile. I had drawn a line and refused to compromise. My parents' frustration turned to reflection as they realized they had taken my efforts for granted. For the first time, they had to confront the consequences of their actions, not just inconvenience, but a tangible loss of control and security. Even my sister began to understand. She observed her parents struggling and realized that the life they had expected to occupy indefinitely was not guaranteed. Watching them navigate this challenge sparked a new sense of responsibility and respect in her. I felt an unexpected calm. I had acted decisively, standing firm even when it was uncomfortable. My independence was no longer theoretical. It was tangible, protected, and respected. The house was mine, yes, but more importantly, my boundaries were clear, and my parents had finally learned a lesson they couldn't ignore. This was the turning point, the moment where control, respect, and accountability shifted irreversibly. After taking control of my house, a sense of calm finally settled over me. For the first time in months, I could walk through each room without tension, knowing my space was truly mine. My parents had retreated, finally confronting the consequences of their behavior. The house was quiet, orderly, and fully under my control. But even as relief washed over me, I knew the real resolution wouldn't come from changing locks. It would come from what followed. Over the next few days, I started helping them navigate alternative arrangements without giving into old patterns of financial dependence. I suggested temporary stays with distant relatives, researched affordable rentals, and even provided guidance on budgeting and responsibilities. I refused to resume covering any bills, knowing that independence required action from them, not continued reliance on me. They were resistant at first, defensive, frustrated, even angry, but gradually they began to understand that my intention wasn't punishment. It was accountability. Meanwhile, I began to reclaim the joy of my home. I hosted friends for dinner, decorated without interference, and allowed myself to enjoy the freedom I had worked so hard to achieve. The small victories, the ability to organize my own schedule, the quiet mornings in my favorite chair, the simple act of knowing my rules were respected, reminded me why boundaries were necessary. And then something unexpected happened. My parents started calling, not to demand, but to consult. They asked questions about rental listings, budgeting advice, and even suggested small ways to contribute to household tasks in their temporary spaces. Slowly, the dynamic shifted. I could feel respect growing where entitlement had once been. They were beginning to learn independence, not through lectures or arguments, but by experiencing responsibility firsthand. By the second week, my parents had begun adjusting to their new reality. They were no longer able to rely on my resources, and that forced them to take responsibility. My father found a part-time position at a local hardware store, while my mother secured a shift at a nearby grocery store. They were hesitant at first, unsure of their abilities after years of dependency, but slowly they began to gain confidence. The sense of entitlement that had fueled the tension started to fade, replaced by a newfound understanding of effort and accountability. I watched from the sidelines as they navigated bills, schedules, and responsibilities, things I once handled for them. Each small success, each paycheck earned, reinforced the lesson they had previously ignored. They began appreciating what independence truly meant, and with it came humility. The sense of control they had taken for granted was replaced by awareness of the work and dedication it took to maintain a home, pay bills, and sustain a life. My relationship with my sister also improved. Seeing our parents adapt and struggle taught her lessons about respect, boundaries, and fairness. She started recognizing the importance of supporting independence rather than interfering or taking sides. Our family dynamic began to shift subtly but meaningfully. Conversations were calmer, boundaries were clearer, and there was a sense of mutual respect that hadn't existed before. Meanwhile, in my home, life returned to the peace I had dreamed of when I first moved in. I could enjoy meals without unsolicited interruptions, host friends without feeling like I was constantly negotiating territory, and plan my days knowing my personal space was fully under my control. The house had become more than a place to live. It was a symbol of lessons learned, boundaries enforced, and independence reclaimed. By the end of the month, the transformation was evident. My parents had fully adapted to their new routines, paying their own bills, managing their schedules, and learning firsthand the value of self-reliance. The frantic energy that had once dominated our interactions was replaced by a quiet respect. They no longer treated my house as an extension of themselves, and I no longer felt the constant pressure to accommodate them. Occasionally, they would call or text for advice, but it was no longer a demand for assistance. It was guidance, showing they had internalized the lessons of responsibility and boundaries. I could see it in the way they approached their jobs, budgeted carefully, and even discussed future plans without expecting my intervention. The fear of being helpless had turned into determination to thrive independently, and that shift changed our family dynamic entirely. Even my sister's perspective had evolved. She began advocating for fairness and independence, reinforcing boundaries rather than undermining them. Our relationship strengthened, rooted in mutual respect and understanding. The household tension that had haunted my dream home for weeks was gone, replaced by harmony and clarity. Looking back, I realized that the turning point was decisive action. Changing the locks wasn't just about asserting control, it was about teaching accountability. My dream house was no longer just a home, it was a symbol of resilience, responsibility, and the power of boundaries. We had all learned lessons about respect, independence, and the consequences of our choices. The house stood as a reminder that even love requires limits, and that true independence often demands difficult but necessary decisions. Looking back, I realized that the events surrounding my dream house were more than just a conflict over space. They were a lesson in boundaries, accountability, and the importance of standing firm when others try to overstep. Owning a home had always symbolized freedom and achievement, but it quickly became clear that true independence is more than financial stability. It's about protecting your space, your time, and your mental peace. My parents' attempt to move in permanently revealed patterns I had ignored for years: entitlement, dependency, and a lack of respect for personal limits. Taking decisive action wasn't easy. Changing the locks felt drastic, but it was necessary. It was the only way to convey clearly that the house, and by extension, my life, was mine to manage. For the first time, they experienced what independence truly means: responsibility for their own choices, consequences for their actions, and the effort required to sustain themselves. Watching them adjust, work, and take ownership of their lives was strangely rewarding. I felt proud not only for reclaiming my space, but for helping them learn lessons they had resisted for decades. The house itself became a symbol, a reminder that respect and boundaries are not optional, they are essential. The quiet evenings, uninterrupted routines, and restored personal space reinforced that independence is fragile and must be defended when threatened. What started as a conflict became a journey for all of us, teaching resilience, accountability, and mutual respect. In the weeks that followed, the balance we had restored began to solidify. My parents, now fully responsible for their own lives, seemed calmer and more self-aware. They had learned that comfort and security are earned, not taken for granted. Our interactions became less tense, more respectful, and far more honest. Conversations focused on advice, support, and sharing moments rather than manipulation or entitlement. I realized the personal growth I had achieved through this experience. Standing firm against loved ones is never easy, but it was necessary to protect my independence and mental well being. I had set boundaries, enforced them, and seen the consequences play out in a way that brought understanding and ultimately transformation. My dream house remained a sanctuary, not just of bricks and walls, but of self respect and hard earned freedom. Even my sister grew from the experience, learning that family loyalty doesn't mean sacrificing boundaries or tolerating disrespect. The entire family dynamic shifted in a healthier direction, rooted in respect, accountability, and autonomy. While tensions had initially seemed destructive, they became a catalyst for positive change. In the end, the house was more than a home. It was a lesson. Independence, respect, and boundaries are earned through action and experience. My parents' attempts to overstep taught all of us that love alone isn't enough. It must coexist with responsibility, accountability, and mutual respect. The challenge of defending my space became a defining moment in my life and ultimately a foundation for healthier relationships and a stronger sense of self.